Hello, this is Brian Foster coming to you live streaming at August 10th, 2021. We're talking about A Wander in the Spirit Land, Chapter 25, A Pitch Battle in Hell. Now, you've been with me for quite a long time on this book, and we're carrying on. I think there's quite a few people who just love this book. But first, let me tell you, I am taking this book. It's free on PDF. If you look down below when I stop the live stream and the information will be there, is you can get to this book on PDF. It's free, and I am interpreting this tome, what was written at the end of the 19th century by, actually, or maybe the beginning of the 20th, I can't remember, by a spirit, Franchezzo, through the medium A. Farnese. And Franchezzo was a very advanced, very intellectual person, but then he wasn't very nice. But just before he died, he met this wonderful woman, and then he died, and he just regretted leaving her so quickly. But she kept in touch with him through mediums, and she helped lead him out of the lower zone, which he calls hell, and he became a better person. He forgave, he tried to get rid of his primitive emotions of distrust, hate, selfishness, pride, etc. So now Spiritism was codified in the 1850s by Allan Kardec, and I have read all of that in Kardec's book, and then there's been books by Leon Denis, Chico Xavier, Yvonne Pereira, Devaldo Franco, still coming by other people too. So Spiritism brings us so much more information. And remember, this Spiritism was promised to us in the New Testament by Christ, who said, I will bring you a consoler, the Spirit of truth, to tell you more. I'm paraphrasing. So, and he is telling us more. And they're going to keep telling us. And Spiritism says that the information given to us in the Old and New Testament and other religious statements were all given to the prophets at the time according to the culture and technology they had. And as we advance in our culture and technology, that will be given more and more information because we can understand more. So Spiritism really tells us, it gives us definite details on heaven, why we're here, how reincarnation works, how karma affects us, all that. So let's get into A Wander in the Spirit Land. And let me bring up chapter 25. I almost said 26. A Pitch Battle in Hell. We now saw before us a vast, slightly undulating plain upon which great masses of dark spirits were moving. At faithful friend's suggestion, that is kind of his small team leader, he's kind of with him, he's helping him, he's a little bit more advanced than Franchezzo. We ascended a small hillock that we might observe their movements. We are now, said faithful friend, about to witness one of the great battles that take place here between the opposing forces of dark spirits whose delight was in war and its rapine and bloodshed, and who here in the dark state, which is a result of their earthly cruelty and ambition, carry on yet their warlike operations against each other and contend for the supremacy of these kingdoms of hell. Behold how they are massing their forces for an attack upon these others on our right, and observe the skill they will display in their maneuvers. The powerful minds of men who swayed armies on earth sway such unhappy beings here as are not as strong enough to resist their spell. And thus they force these less powerful spirits to fight under their banners, whether they will or not, just as they did with mortals on earth. Now, all this information that he's giving us is backed up by spiritist literature. There are armies, there are gangs, there's weapons. Now, the interesting thing about weapons, if you were a spirit who's been in this dark abyss, which Francisco calls hell, for a couple hundred years, and the highest weapon, actually more than a couple hundred years, is like an arrow or something. If another spirit shoots a gun at you, you don't think anything of it because everything's in your mind. That person who shoots a gun at you, you have to think that gun is going to enter your body and wound you greatly. Of course, you can't die. These people will just like faint on the battlefield, and then they'll come up again. So if someone points a gun at you, it's like, well, what's that? That's nothing. So you're not affected. But if someone points an arrow, has an axe, and hacks you with it, boy, then that really hurts because in your mind, that would hurt on earth. See, the mind, right? Thought is action in the spirit world. Now, also these great battles have been taught by other spirits and even high spirits. Is that the generals of these battles don't just force or even cajole the people to be in part of this war. Sometimes they'll force them to change their shape, so they'll have cavalry. But the horses really are souls who they said, okay, you have to change shape into a horse, and you'll be a horse. That's that's is amazing. So that shows you how powerful the dominant willpower of these people in the spirit world, in the lower zone. These are very powerful, kind of not nice lords of the dark abyss of hell. If that's probably what would Franchezzo say. So now I would like to say that even and as spirits tell us, high spirits tell us, there is no all good or all bad spirits. Everybody has some or the other, except of course when you're able to be a perfect spirit or pure spirit, I should say, like Jesus Christ. That's what we're trying to achieve. We're just a bit hopefully more mature than these people down here having war. So even these great generals, at some day, it may take thousands of years, will decide, oh, well, what am I achieving here? This is ridiculous forcing these people and being mean all the time. I want something better. And they will turn and they will go after something better. Okay, let me continue on. You will see these powerful leaders engage in a struggle worse than deadly, since no death can come to end the contest. And yet they renew over and over again, as it would almost seem eternally, or until, as to be hoped, the satiety of mind of one of these or other of these powerful leaders will at last make him long for some nobler form of contest, some higher triumph of the soul than is won over these miserable beings in battles, where victory gives only a fresh right to torture and oppress the vanquished. The same instincts and natural gifts, which are now perverted to personal ambition and the lust for cruelty and dominion as their only aim, will, when purified, make these spirits mighty helpers, where now they are destroyers, and the same powers of the will help forward the progress they now retard. When this progress takes place depends for each upon the latent ability of the soul itself, the awakening of the dormant love of goodness and justice and truth to be found in all. Though like seeds in the earth, these germs of better things may lie, long hidden beneath the mass of evil that overloads them. There must and does come a time for each, when the better soul awakens, and these germs of good send out shoots that lead to repentance and bring forth an abounding harvest of virtue and good works. Now, I will. This is great because this shows you this is the writing of a spirit through a medium, had nothing to do with spiritism. And yet, higher spirits tell us in spiritist literature and communications from high spirits to spiritist mediums that they're always, and I've read this in multiple places, like there's some warlord in the lower zone or the dark abyss, purgatory or hell, as you want to call it, although there's no eternal punishment. And they say, this guy has a lot of willpower, and you look at him as this mean, evil thing, but with his willpower, once he turns for the good, he will rise. He may, you never know, may rise quickly and be a very big help to Jesus in heaven because he has willpower. He has focus, right? And that's what we're all learning. We're learning to, as we're in the physical world, we're learning to focus our energy and use our willpower, but not let primitive emotions make us angry, right? But focused. We can be focused, and we can tell people, oh, this is what you must do. We can be forceful but not angry. You don't want primitive emotions making your force shoot out all over the place, where you can concentrate your force of will and get things done. And that's exactly what the spirit world wants us to learn. And these people will learn, and they have a step up a certain way. Um, I don't know about step up, but maybe an attribute that will do them well when they decide to rise and follow the path of light. I'll start again. We look over the vast plain and now beheld the two mighty hosts of spirits drawn up to confront one another in the array of battle. Here and there I beheld powerful spirits, leading each his band or regiment as in an earthly army. In the van of the opposing forces were two majestic beings who might have been models for Milton's Lucifer. So strong was the sense of power and high intellect with which they impressed me. In each there was a certain beauty and grandeur of form and feature, a regal majesty, even the degradation of hell. But alas, that beauty was that of a wild, fierce tiger or lion that watches how he may rend his army in pieces and drag his prey into his den. Now let's talk about. He said, great intellect, high intellect. There are many people in this dark abyss, as he says, hell, who are extremely intelligent. Intelligence, unfortunately, does not correlate with spiritual maturity. You have people who on earth who seem to be very unintelligent, but are the nicest people and the most trustworthy people on earth. Now, also want to remind you that as spirits, we're all equal. I mean, we can all be equally intelligent if that's what we want to work on. There's nothing like on Earth, on our physical Earth. You're born with a certain amount of capability of intelligence, and that's your limit. Just like you're born being able to run fast or not. I will never compete in the Olympics for anything, where others who were born different ways can do great. They can get gold, but not I. But as a spirit, we all have the ability to do that what we want if we concentrate and work on it. So that's an important point to remember. I'll continue. Dark and foreboding were their countenances, cruel and ferocious their gleaming eyes, the false smile showing their sharp teeth like those animals of prey. The cunning of the serpent was in their looks, and the pitiless hunger of the vulture in their smile. Each rode in his chariot of war, drawn not by horses, but by the spirits of degraded men, whom they lashed forward as beasts of burden, and drove furiously on to be trampled down in the melee as cattle. That's exactly what I was saying. They force people to change themselves. Wide strains of music that sounded like the shriek of souls of the damned and the thunders of a mighty storm broke from the assembled armies. And with one fell swoop they rushed forward and bore down upon each other, flying and hurrying through the air, or dragging themselves along the ground, pushing, hustling, jostling, and trampling like a herd of wild animals. On they came, and as they met, their fierce cries and shouts and imprecations rent the air and made even hell more hideous. They charged and recharged, they maneuvered, marched, and countermarched these phantom spirit armies of the dead, even as they had done in the battles of earth life. They fought and wrestled like demons, not men, for they had no weapons save those of wild beasts, their teeth and claws. If a battle with mortal weapons is horrible, this was doubly so, where they fought as wolves and tigers might, the two powerful leaders directing the mass, urging them on and guiding the fight as the tide of battle swept one side or the other. So, I hope this shows you that let me go back, I went too far. Sometime, okay. I hope this shows you that, and what I've been reading in the last weeks, that there is organization to purgatory. There's organization to the lower zone, which is purgatory is the crust of the earth below. The lower zone is the crust of the earth up to the lowest level of heaven. There isn't this wandering zombies. There's organization, just like a prison with a lot of not nice people, spiritually immature people. who are learning a lesson. God bless them. There is organization in a prison that this happens. Same thing here. There are people that come to be dominant. There are cities. There are factories where they make things. There is stuff going on all the time. Now in heaven, it's no different. Of course, that's all guided by the law of affinity, like with like, of love and spiritual maturity and pureness, where people work with each other, they don't malicious gossip, they love each other, they support each other. And there's a lot of organizations that many of them help the spirits in heaven, and many of them are there to help us, to watch us, to inspire us, to help keep our pre-planned blueprint on track so we can learn what we need to learn, given because each of us has a blueprint in life. Now, these people in this dark abyss, this purgatory, they didn't learn the lessons that were offered to them. And that's where free will comes in. You don't have to become spiritually better. No one's forcing you. It's your free will. But then what happens? You live a life, you don't improve, you go right back here again. Hopefully at some point, something will happen to kind of turn on the light and say, oh, I being mean and wanting revenge and dominance over my fellow men isn't really the way I should be. And then they will stop. But it's up to them. No one's forcing them to become better people. That is the key. If Jesus Christ came down to earth and told everybody, okay, anybody who's mean, I'm gonna, they're gonna be in big trouble, and people would not be mean for a while. And if Jesus Christ left for like 3 months, people would say, oh, that must just have been, we must have been crazy. There's nobody here. They'd be mean again. It's not internal. The spirit world wants internal change. They want you to change from the bottom of your heart, to rip out these primitive emotions and really replace them with a certainty of good purpose. Okay, I'll carry on. Over all had towered these two dark regal spirits, and now no longer content to let their soldiers fight, but bent upon the destruction of the other, they rose from the fighting mass, and soaring high above them, turned their looks upon each other with the deadliest hate. Then flying through the air with their dark robes extended behind them and above them like wings, they grappled and wrestled together in a fierce struggle for supremacy. It was as though two eagles fought in midair, while a mass of carrion crows grubbed and fought for worms beneath them. I turned from the crows to watch the eagles, and to mark how, with no weapons but their hands and their powerful wills, they fought as wild beasts do in a forest. They uttered no sound, no cry, but gripped each other with a death grip that neither would relax, and swayed to and fro in the air before us. Now one upward, now the other, their fierce eyes stabbing each other with their fiery darts, their hot breaths scorching each other's faces, their fingers clutching at each other's throats, and both seeking for a chance to fashion on their enemy with their teeth. Backwards and forwards, up and down they swayed and writhed in what seemed to be a death struggle for both. At last one seemed to fail. He sank below the other, who was bearing him to the ground to dash him, as I saw over a deep precipice, into a chasm in the rocks that skirted the field of battle, a deep and dark and awful pit into which he meant to hurl the vanquished one and keep him prisoner. Fierce and long was the struggle, for the one below would not give in and clung to the other to drag him down with him if possible. But in vain. His powers were failing fast, and as they reached the black chasm and hung poised over it, I saw the uppermost one wrench him free by a mighty effort and fling the other from him down into those awful depths. With a shudder, I turned away, and I saw the battle had been raging as fiercely on the plain. Those spectral hosts had fought, and the army of the victorious general had beaten back the forces of the vanquished foe till they were broken and dispersed in all directions, leaving their disabled comrades on the field, lying as wounded men do in an earthly battle, while the victors were dragging away with them their captives, to what fate I could only too well guess. And that's because Franchezzo had seen people torturing other people, just sometimes for meanness, for pleasure, all horrible things. I'll carry on. Sickened with disgust with their brutishness, I would fain have left this place, but faithful friend, touching my shoulder, said, now has come the time for our work, my friend. Let us descend yonder and see if there are none whom we can help. Amongst the fallen and vanquished, we may find those who are sick of war and its horrors as you, and who will be but too glad of our help. So we went down to the plain. It was as might have been a battlefield when night had fallen upon it, and there are but the wounded and the slain left. All the other spirits had gone like a flock of evil birds to seek fresh carrion. I stood among a writhing, moaning mass of beings, and knew not where to begin my help. There were so many. It was worse, 1,000 times worse, than any mortal battlefield. Now, interesting, it just reminds me of another spirit communication that was in the monthly magazines by Allan Kardec. And they asked this one person who had died on the battlefield. And then he said, yeah, I died on the battlefield. And what I saw is soldiers would die, they'd be shot. And then they'd get up and they'd get confused, but then they would go and they'd try and fight the enemy, who they thought were the enemy, right? And then it's like they would go right through them. It wouldn't work. But then they'd see the spirit enemy that had died, and then those two would fight. Now, the other thing, that they also called up an officer in that battle who was killed. And he says, yes, that's exactly the way it was as this other soldier described it. But I want to tell you something else. And this is the amazing part. He said, everyone who died in that battle, and this is bullets, cannon going around. This is in the 1850s, right? So there was cannon, but there's cannon shot. It's still pretty bloody. Remember, the Civil War in the United States was in the 1860s, and there was not good. So he says, everyone who died because of a planned death. There were no unplanned deaths on the battlefield. So let that thing sink in for a moment. The spirit world is so mightier complex than we can even believe, that they can orchestrate a battle and make sure only the people that were destined to die in that particular battle, with lead flying all around, would die. Think of that. I mean, this complete chaos, people firing. Yeah, there was no machine guns back then, but I mean, if that happened then, it's the same thing happened in World War II and other wars, where there's ways to die all over the place, and yet only those who were destined to die would die. So if you think of the spirit world, as I did before I understood Spiritism and certain things happened to me, as this kind of handoffish, far away thing, Jesus loves us, but we're kind of on earth to make our own way. Couldn't be further from the truth. We are watched, we are guided, we are inspired by good and ignorant spirits, but it's up to us to filter for our conscience, to filter in only the good advice. But think of how powerful, and how they must have computing power that's just beyond our imagination. It makes our greatest computer nothing, right? Nothing more than like a watch. So let me carry on. I have seen the dead and dying lying in the streets of my native town, thick as fallen leaves, and my heart had ached and bled for them, and burned with shame and anger that such things could be. But even there was at least the peace and sleep of death to soften the anguish, and there was the hope of helping those who yet lived. But here, in this awful hell, there seemed no hope and no death that could relieve these suffering ones. No morning that should dawn upon the night of their miseries. If they revived, it would not be to live again this awful. If they revived, would it not be to live again this awful life, to find themselves surrounded ever by this awful night and these fierce wild beasts of men? Now, this is purgatory, and these men who know they're going to be okay again because they've probably been through battles before. They go, is this forever? And that's part of the punishment of what they get. It's not forever. It's when they change their character or attitude, but they think it's forever. I stooped down and tried to raise the head of one poor wretch who lay moaning at my feet, crushed till his spirit body seemed but a shapeless mass. And as I did so, the mysterious voice spoke in my ears and said, "Even in hell there is hope, or why else you come? The darkest hour is ever before the dawn, and for these, the vanquished and the fallen, has come the hour of their change. The very cause that have made them to be thus borne down and trampled under is that which shall now raise them." See, how does the spirit world fight evil? They use evil to fight evil. Think of that. Their desire for higher and better things, the shrinking from the evil around them, has rendered them weak in the wickedness, which is the strength of hell and its inhabitants, and has made them waver and hesitate to thrust at and harm another with the ruthless force of these other wild and worthless beings. And thus they've been borne down and vanquished. But their fall from power here will open to them the doors of a higher state, and thus shall there dawn for them the gray glimmer of a higher hope, more not for them, but to seek to ease their sufferings, that they may sink into a sleep of death to this sphere, and wake into a new life in the sphere next above. And what, I asked, of that powerful spirit whom I saw thrown into the dark chasm? He too will be helped in time, but his soul is not yet ripe for help. It is of no use to try till then. The voice ceased, and faithful friend who was beside me made signs to show me how to soothe these weary ones to sleep, and pointed out to me the numerous stars of light which had gathered on that field of pain, and they were carried by those of our brotherhood who were, like ourselves, drawn here on their mission of love and mercy. Ere long, the writhing, moaning forms had sunk into unconsciousness, and a short time after I saw a sight that was strange and wonderful indeed. Over each silent form there arose a faint, misty, floating vapor, such I had seen once before in the case of a spirit we had rescued. As I had already told, generally these vapors took shape and solidity and assumed the form of the released spirit or soul, till then each was borne away by the bands of bright ethereal spirits who had gathered above our heads, till the last was gone and our work and theirs were done. That's the end of chapter 25. So I hope, now there's so much revealed in this chapter, and it reveals, and there's nothing in this chapter that goes against the tenets of the doctrine of Spiritism. And to really, if you really want to understand Spiritism, what I suggest for those is to download my book. There we go. Download it's at www.nwspiritism.com. There'll be a link in the description below. And it's free on PDF. Spiritism 101, the third revelation. It's also available in French. Also, if you want, it's on Kindle, paperback, and Audible. But I would go through that. It kind of gives you an overview. I think it's like 100 pages or less. Then what I would do is I would invest time to really look at the Spirit's book. And the Spirit's book is what was codified by Allan Kardec in the 1850s. It's a series of 1,019 questions. Now, to me, it was fascinating. And to others, I'm sure it'd be fascinating too, because it gives us all this information. But if you don't like to read the book and you like to listen, on YouTube, I have a playlist called The Spirit's Book. I have every chapter in the Spirit's book for which I speak. And also, you can also download MP3 or an MP4 something file. It's an Audible type file. From my website here below, nwspiritism.com, and you can listen to it also, which is, I mean, there's other books by Allan Kardec, that Genesis, Heaven and Hell, The Gospel According to Spiritism, which I read them all in. They're all worth it. Now, lastly, to get a good overview, and I've written 15 books, but man, I just want to go over kind of what I think is the way to introduce yourself, is the book where I try to tie everything together, which is the spirit realm. Spiritism has revealed the reality of our existence. in which I talk about the spirit realm, the different dimensions, the physical realm, what is a spirit, who and what is God, which you know we don't really know, but we know more about Jesus Christ. He's the leader of our planet and some other planets besides. But what and who is a spirit, how spirits rise, what we do in the physical plane, how we're guided, how we ascend, all of that, what the trials and tribulation, what they mean we go through. It gives you a good kind of overview of Spiritism and what we know about the spirit realm. So I want to thank everyone for being with me today. I hope you enjoyed this. I will post this on Rumble and BitChute. So please sign up for those because you never know when YouTube will stop a channel. They may not want any type of uh, spiritual information out. You know, they are censoring everything. So I hope you sign up for Rumble and BitChute also. Anyway, I want to say God bless everybody. God bless.